Hello everybody. Captain Happy here, and though I've gotten a bit away from doing the commentary for my videos, kind of felt like this ship is particular and special enough that I needed to go into a little bit more depth than my first video. It is the Tier 10 British light cruiser, I guess? Technically it's a light cruiser, though I'll get into specifics of why I have a question mark behind that, but it is the Plymouth. It is available in the armory right now for 21k steel, I think, but that might be after the coupon, and which puts it definitely on the lower end as far as cost goes for steel ships. Um, so I have gotten quite a few questions recently regarding this ship, a combination of either comparing it to the Mino or Edinburgh or the like, uh, and or considering the steel ship and the viability for clan battles and stuff. Should people invest in the Stalingrad or the Plymouth? And I won't be getting into any comparisons between the Stalingrad. They're both very viable, but they have very distinctly different advantages and play styles. What I do want to do is do a more of a head-to-head comparison between this and the Minnow, because as I've heard, I don't think there are very many people talking about this ship as though it is not a good ship. But in my personal opinion, it is blatantly overpowered. Before I get into too much detail there, I do have a dual definition of overpowered for ships in this game. The first one is if a ship has certain strengths that allow it to, in the right hands, be an incredibly overpowered ship. And examples are like the Smallland is a good one, where um, in the right hands with someone who knows what they're doing, a DD main or something, the Smallland is very, very, very strong and very influential on the outcome of a game. But you put the Smallland in the hands of someone with less experience, they're going to run into the same problems that a lot of people do, and it won't necessarily, the gimmicks of the ship won't get you out of trouble. The second definition is a ship that put in almost anyone's hands who even has a rudimentary knowledge of how to play the game, an average player, if it can consistently turn out very, very good games. And the Plymouth, for me, falls distinctly into that category. Now, I didn't want to take too long with this because I do have some replays that I want to get into that also highlight some of the strengths. So we will start with the guns versus the minnow. Now, they are the same guns as far as being 152 millimeter. The primary differences between the two ships is the number of guns and the reload. So they both get the AP, the British cruiser AP increased AP penetration values. They also have the shorter fuses. So despite not having HE, you're very, very, very potent against destroyers in particular. Where the Plymouth has a 4x4 setup, and the reload is at 5.7, which is very nice. The Minnow has 10 guns, but its reload is at 2.8, at least how I have it set up. Face value, while the Plymouth has distinctly more guns, the reload on the Minnow is about 1/3 of the amount of time. Now, one of the mitigating aspects here is that if you're in a scenario where you have to be completely bow in, you can comfortably bring 8 guns to bear on the Plymouth. Whereas on the Minnow, if you're completely bow in, you can only bring 4. And then a little bit of an angle, you can bring 6. Now, the back turrets have a bit of a better firing arcs on the Minnow, so you can bring them to bear and get all 10 firing with a bit better of an angle than on the Plymouth. But in my mind, it's kind of a draw. That having 16 guns, despite the fact that they reload in 5.7, kind of counters or mitigates to a degree the advantage the Minnow might have even with its reload. So moving on to torpedoes. Now this one, very distinctly, the Minotaur has an advantage. Again, just like the artillery, they are exactly the same torpedoes. 10-kilometer range, you can single launch. I love single launch torps. But the Plymouth only gets 4, and the Minnow gets 8. So definitely a point for the Minotaur there, as far as applicability for its torpedoes. AA defense, we are going to give an absolutely big check mark in favor of the Minnow. 62 is the rate of AA for the Plymouth, and the Minnow's at a 97. Now, again, this is tempered a bit by the fact that, as we all know, with AA and CVs recently, it's not overwhelmingly relevant. Where the Minotaur absolutely used to be a no-fly zone for CVs, that's not the case anymore. So despite having overwhelmingly better AA defense, it doesn't give it that much of an advantage ship to ship. Maneuverability. So a pretty slow speed here. There are plenty of battleships at 8, 9, and 10 that are faster top speed than the Plymouth. But turning circle is 680 meters with a rudder shift time of 8.1. The Minnow can get up to 35.2, but its turning circle is 750 and rudder shift is 8.3. Again, this is with the modules that I have and the way I have it set up. So just the maximum speed on the Minotaur is a bit faster, but the turning circle and the rudder shift are a little bit slower. Again, to me, both aspects kind of counter each other out, so there isn't really a clear winner. I guess if you need to run away, the Minotaur definitely has an advantage there. Concealment, again, it's very, very, very close. 9.2 by sea for the Plymouth, and the Minotaur is 9.3. So not particularly, like the tenth of a kilometer here is made up for by your smoke firing penalty, where it's a tenth of a kilometer less in the Minotaur than it is in the Plymouth. So that one kind of ends up as a draw. Now we come to what is the first of two major differences that, in my book at least, put the Plymouth, if not on paper, in practice, in a much higher area than the Minnow, and that is, first, the armor. So as you can see here, I've eliminated everything except for the Citadel. And pretty typical Citadel for cruisers, runs from underneath the front turret to underneath the back turret. The armor isn't tremendous amount to speak of, 114 millimeters, 16 under the water and everything. But if you notice, it's completely flat. There is no raised section of it or anything. Whereas with the Minnow, yeah, that's a heck of a lot more Citadel to be able to hit, and a little bit less in the way of Citadel armor. Now, for the people who were talking about it being roughly equal to the squishiness of a Minnow, I have to vehemently disagree with that assessment, for two reasons, and they should be pretty obvious. The first one is this part right here that comes up very high above the waterline, and as anyone who shoots at minnows knows, it's not difficult to Citadel a Minotaur. The Plymouth, obviously, not so easy, at least not from those angles. And the second part of this that really stands out is when you're facing things in particular that have become more common, like Petros, and I have a good example of the Plymouth here tanking some fire from a Petro, where the shell arcs are very low and the shell velocity is very high. If they're able to overmatch your armor or punch through from the front, and this goes up to higher caliber battleships, there isn't, like, you have a chance of getting away with it here. The shells can kind of fly almost, in line with your Citadel armor, Whereas on the minnow, you punch through from the front or the aft, there's a nice flat area right there that you can punch through and do major citadel damage. Now, that is something, and we've all seen minnows take a one salvo and then end up losing 80 to 90% of their HP, but mitigated to a degree because the minnow does get a super heal, and that can bring it back up to about 2/3 health. Let's say it takes a salvo from a Yami and it gets knocked down to 10% HP. With that super heal, it can get back up to 2/3. So that helps, and the Plymouth does not get a super heal. However, if you're not able to punch through and do the same kind of citadel damage, which my experience so far has been it's not easy to do that on this ship, then you don't really need a super heal. And you put all of that together, and my experience so far has been that the survivability of the Plymouth is much higher and much better than the minnow is on average. It does, if it does have weaknesses as far as enemy ships shooting at it. Again, not too different from the minnow, but it does not like Italian cept, which I guess honestly not many ships really enjoy getting hit by that. But the other one that I have noticed is things like Hindenburgs at range firing AP. And I think, this is just a theory of mine, but I would be willing to bet that a part of the reason is that unlike certain battleships and things like Petros at close range, where the angle of the incoming shells is a bit flatter, if you get more plunging fire, you are able to maybe punch through to the citadel a little bit more effectively. So that is definitely something to watch out for. As for the second advantage to the Plymouth, the significant one over the minnow, with its 9.2 detection, you get something that the minnow doesn't, or you get something that the minnow has to make a choice between, and that is you get a smoke just like a minnow does, and you get it's got a pretty long endurance too. What I've got it to with the flag for your increased smoke duration is about 25 seconds from the time that one smoke ends to the time that you have another smoke ready to go. So you can spend the overwhelming majority of the match completely undetected, which in itself helps you mitigate a degree of damage. But here's the real trump card. Where a minnow, you have to pick between these two consumables. In the Plymouth, you get smoke and radar. And the radar has a 9-kilometer range, which means in practice, and again, this is something you'll see in some of the replays and have seen in my first video on this ship. You're sailing along, you get detected, wait about 2 seconds, pop your smoke, pop your radar, and proceed eliminating the destroyer that's spotting you. So, spent long enough kind of gabbing, let's get to some gameplay and see some of these things in practice. Alrighty, and here we are. Standard battle on North, the old North, as you guys can see. That big island in the center isn't broken up like they did on the new version, which I guess it's new, but it's a few years old. So, first thing I did want to say about the position I'm taking here. Typically speaking, in a Plymouth, I don't look to go into the open water like this. Though you are relatively safe with your smokescreen as long as you bear in mind where radar threat might be and torpedo threat might be. But I did want to support this Holland in front of me. And the Holland, as you can see, is a member of the TNG clan. And he and the Shima behind me end up definitely pulling their weight in this match, as you'll see as it progresses. But we have a Yoshino and a Montana. Now, one thing that is something it was hard for me to really decipher is relative amount of damage to a bow-in ship. So you'll see, like on this Yoshino in particular, I very rarely with him bowing get more. Well, there's a 2K salvo, but it doesn't rarely get higher than that, and I don't know necessarily if a Minnow does much better. But what you will see in a moment when this Montana comes into range and I start focusing him, that British AP do what it do, and it in particular loves broadside battleships. In particular, British, American, and German, and holy cow, the new American battleship line. I would have to say there's so much superstructure to hit on Vermont's. It loves them in particular. So throw my torps out, not really hoping to hit anything, but maybe sneak a kill and discourage them from continuing their push, and our Holland lands a nice fat hit on that Montana. And now you get to see some of the AP power. 5k, 5k, 6k, and this is very, very consistent per self. And if you're in a relatively safe position and can find a battleship like this, it's very good farming. Now, one of the things I try to do, and this is all very basic, it's definitely not specific to the Plymouth, but I try to put myself in a position. Nice blind shot by the Yoshino there. By the way, remember him? Because he comes in later kind of doing the same thing. But I look for a battleship that's pushing well inside by relatively short 15-kilometer range. And then by smoking up there, I can kind of guarantee a fair amount of time working him over. Good shot by the Yoshino there. But again, my average heal, quote-unquote, is more than adequate. Now here, yeah, I even had the debate in-game. Maybe I should have kept trying to focus that Montana down. But what I really wanted to do was ensure that this Yoshino decided to fall back instead of continue pushing forward. And with my firepower and the torpedoes from the Shima and the Holland, we do exactly that and discourage him from continuing to push south here. Take a few more hits. HE isn't a big deal, even from the big guns of the Yoshino. And I start kiting away myself. And yep, he switches to AP. I had a feeling that that would be coming. And, well, 6k for him. So it's salvos like that where I could be totally wrong with this assessment. But I do feel like, especially like from an angle kiting like that, that a Minotaur might be a little bit more prone to taking heavier hits under those circumstances. And though the maneuverability of this ship leaves something to be desired, I haven't had too much trouble doing this kiting away. And you know, your rudder shift isn't too bad, turning circle isn't too bad. I'll skip ahead a little bit further. I tried to cut it down because this video is already becoming kind of ridiculously long. And Mr. Gearing pops back out here because the Shima and the Holland both kind of forced him out of this smoke. And so the shell velocity on these 152mm guns is, I believe it's 860. I get nice, lucky, semi-blind shot on the gearing there. So they are kind of floaty, but they're nowhere near as floaty as like American shells. So you can hit relatively consistently even at your max 15-kilometer range. And Smolensk pops out here, and now you see we're getting into a part of the map where I do tend to like to take the Plymouth. Someplace a little more central, or if it's not standard battle, if it's typical domination, somewhere close to a cap or two caps to make use of my radar and smoke and kind of be a deterrent against their DDs pushing in. And you can see, so this is, I think I'd say fairly, this is pretty pleasurable for anyone, whether, no matter what ship you're in, is to work down a Smolensk who spent the whole game doing a lot of what I'm doing, which is farming from smoke. But right there, you saw Cunningham proc, and it gave me an extra consumable. Not that at this point in the game I really needed any of them, But it's absolutely, in this ship, it's relatively easy to get 2 kills and proc that special ability. And with a heal in particular, obviously a smoke radar hydra, but the heal in particular, an extra consumable in any game is a very welcome thing. So now we get more into the center of the map, more into islands, where if I'm in a situation where I don't have smoke, I can at least utilize some island cover. And at this point, you know, point-wise and ship-wise, we're not exactly in control of this game. But if you look at the map, we have map control like crazy. Because of the job that our Holland and Shima have done in the West, supported a little bit by me there initially. We've been able to basically herd the enemy team into this nice little area right around their cap circle. And it's right about here that I'm going to take up my position. And this is one thing that I have seen in the Plymouth very, very frequently. There isn't always a lot of movement. There have been a lot of games where I barely move more than 3 or 4 grid squares after you know, spawning in and moving into whatever position I like to be in. And you saw from my first video in that 7-kill game that I barely moved at all. I smoked up 3 times in the same spot, right there. So that was an AP volley from the Hindenburg. And what I was referencing earlier, I feel like that they might have a bit easier job punishing this ship, again, because of the angle that their shells are coming in. It's a higher angle, whereas this Yoshino, I obviously have ticked him off, and he's going to spend the rest of his life in this match trying to blind fire me, which, though that one wasn't very good, he does, I'll give him credit where credit's due. He got the fire on me, the blind shot early in the game, and he's about to get a decent salvo. But again, this is something where I'm questioning. I'm not asserting anything, but I wonder if in a mino, obviously not that salvo, but this salvo, I wonder if in a mino, if I'm dead there. I don't know, maybe not, but it feels like there is a high frequency of that kind of thing in this ship that I'm able to survive and sustain. Whereas in a minnow, you're much more squishy to larger caliber AP. And there goes Mr. Yoshino. So hooray, kill number 3. RPF and last known location. I have a feeling that I'm going to catch Haragumo here in a second. And it just flipped over, so I know he's continuing west, but he may have turned north, so I'm kind of waiting here. There we go. And yep, I catch him out. And this here is, even though I didn't use what I was highlighting with this ship, where I was in the open and getting spotted, and then able to smoke up and radar the DD. You can see here why, just like most radar ships, except for the fact that most radar ships don't come with smoke, very, very annoying for DDs and very, very potent. My shooting could have been a little better here, for sure, especially against the Haragumo. They're not particularly maneuverable or particularly fast. I probably could have gotten them a bit closer to death, but made his location known, and certainly now our Shima is aware of where he is and can be a little bit more careful. We're going to get another look here in a moment, but again, this is why this positioning works. Even though I have a smoke ready to go, I can use the island to kind of maximize my farming potential. And I'm in a position where, for the most part, I can actually shoot at stuff. And so the Yami and the Vermont are coming in, and you'll see, again, the potency of this firepower against battleships if they're showing you any kind of side. I do have to be careful about Yagumo torps, but my hydro's almost back up, so I'm not too worried about it at this point. And I just start farming Yami. And there's 4K. And 5K. And 3. I guess a little bit low on that one, but that's okay, because I have the arcs there made up for that with 7.5. And the final volley. Yay! Yammy dead. So that's kill number 4, and from a relatively even position in the match, all except for map control, we have now very soundly taken control. And though I got a few salvos off on the Vermont, absolutely this Haragumo is the priority target. Our Shima's really low, and in fact he might go down. The Haru's gun power is pretty bad, but he's also getting focused by 3 different ships. And there is the Kraken. And now, to finish off, you get to see where he's not even full broadside, but the amount of superstructure there is to hit on Vermonts, and the fact that they have a really difficult time maneuvering. The damage a ship like this can do, or to be fair, a Minotaur too, is absolutely disgusting. And not to mention, he has not 1, but 2 walls of skill coming right at him. So there's 1,652s from me, a whole slew of torps from the Summers, and a whole slew of torps from the Holland. And that about does it. The only thing left is the FDR, and he did his best to get as far away into the corner as humanly possible. So this game is going to end without much else to do, but 240k damage and a Kraken. Give you the results here. High caliber, Confederate, actually a Dreadnought in there too, which is kind of nice. And base XP of just about 3k, which is always very nice. And right here at the end, I sprinkled in a couple more battle results screenshots. It's not all the time, but this is very consistent in this ship, and it has a lot to do with my opinion of why it's overpowered. So I hope you enjoyed this bit more comprehensive look at the Plymouth. I will catch everybody next time.